So our men, a lot of our men, are at a men's retreat. They're wrapping up today. I even heard Josh called me last night. They had ministry time for like an hour and were just blown away by some of the incredible things that God was doing. He was trying to download it as quickly as possible. But there's just been, the reports that I'm hearing back from that retreat are pretty incredible. So wives that are here waiting for them to return, I can't wait to hear what you get report-wise. Sorry, I'm getting situated up here. Don't mind me. So the first time that I left here to go for a ladies' retreat, and we left the men for the weekend, I get a call on Sunday morning that there's fire trucks in the front parking lot. And so somehow or another, actually I know how it was, they caught something on fire, and we get a call. So the ladies leave for a weekend, and they about burn the church down. But so far today, we're doing pretty good. No emergencies of any kind, so I'll take it. I was joking with Josh last night because the last time, or one of the times that I spoke before, he was at a men's retreat, and I was speaking at our home church in North Carolina, and he decided, like, at the last minute, he's going to leave and try to get home in time to be there with me. He's like, I just want to be there with you. I don't ever get to actually hear you speak. And so I'm on the phone with him. He's driving back, and I hear sirens in the background, and he's totally getting pulled over for speeding like none other to get home. So this time I told him to stay put. We don't need any more of those. But I am excited to share with you today about Wholehearted. The whole Wholehearted series, that's such a mouthful. It really was birthed from something God was doing in me. And so Josh and I, if you've been doing the Lexio, the journaling reading plan, I called him one morning, and God had just spoke some just really cool stuff to me. And he was just basically, Summer, I'm calling you to live wholeheartedly. And for me, that meant some very specific, intense things. And so I called Josh, and I'm like, this is what God spoke to me, and I was really excited about it. And we were just processing back and forth because he had been doing it with the guys' Devo group at Arabica. And so 6 hours later, late into the day, he's like, I can't shake the word wholehearted. He goes, what do you think about for our next series if that's where we go? And I'm like, all right, let's do it. And he's like, well, that means you're speaking because you're the one who started this whole thing. So even a part of the wholehearted work that God's doing in my life is me standing here today. I prefer to let him speak at any given moment, but I know that God's called me to share. He's called me to speak his word, and I have been disobedient in that. So even me standing here today is a part of my wholehearted journey of obedience. The last 2 years and it's not really related to church at all, but for the last 2 years for us personally, we had a lot of just family intense situations. Josh has shared some of that along the journey with you, and I'm not even going to go to unpack it this morning, but there were some really hard conversations. There were times where we've had family members leave, we've had family members lie, we've had family members say to our faces some of the worst words you could ever speak to a human being. And so it's just been an intense 2 years of life. But through the process, for me personally, God's been doing a very deep, significant work. I've never felt closer to him. I've never felt his presence in more of a real, true way. And so this journey is a part of what leads me to share with you today, because it's really me just being transparent and vulnerable about the process. And even I'll share at the end with you a part of even one of my entries from Alexio from this week of just the significant work that he's doing. And so a few weeks ago, as you were following along our reading plan, we read Psalms 17, and I've just been captivated, and I haven't been able to shake it since then. And it's really about King David. And King David, I don't think he's legit wholehearted. He's one of the best leaders in the Old Testament. It's phenomenal just reading his story. But in a snapshot, he was anointed to be king at age 15. He would not become king until 35. There's a 20-year window of this, the journey of the process of preparation and under attack, attempted to be killed on numerous times. His character, his integrity, every ounce of him was full blast attack. So I'm sure somebody in this room can identify with that on some level. You've experienced it. And so I'm just fascinated. As I was reading this story, first of all, you should know this about me. I really did not want to go into ministry. I had a desire really to go into law school and wanted to be an attorney, and Josh will be the first to testify that that should have been the case because I'm really good at picking an argument and winning an argument and all the above. And so we joke about it all the time, but God absolutely, he really shut that down for me. I knew at 13 he called me to ministry. All through high school fought it, and there was a point, which is another story for another day, but there was a point of surrender for me where he really got my attention. I'm like, okay, this is not my life. I don't get to choose to live it the way I want to. I have to surrender to you. And so I did. And so one of the best things that ever happened to me is I actually showed up at Bible college angry. Josh will tell you when he first met me, I was not a pleasant person. I was angry that I was at Bible college. I was angry that I was pursuing this whole, I was still fighting God on this subject. But on the first day there, I got to meet the most incredible man, and he is one of God's greatest gifts to me. And so I'm so thankful for I was obedient in that situation. And so when I was reading through this text, I literally saw it almost as like it going down in a courtroom. And so I want you to kind of think about it along those lines this morning, because David it was almost step by step, like what would take place in a courtroom. So if you want to turn your Bibles to Psalm 17. Sorry, my allergies are crazy. Psalm 17, verse 1. Hear a just cause, O Lord. Attend to my cry. Cry is complete and utter desperation. It is literally like what you hear, and I've heard it before, and it is the worst sound of even just when someone has immediately lost a loved one, being in the presence, and the grieving and the moaning that comes forth from that cry is gut-wrenching. This isn't just like a casual, hey, God, this is a cry from his inward, inner parts. He says, hear a cause, a just cause, not just any cause, not just any fight, but there is justice to be said for this, not just picking a fight for the sake of picking a fight. Oh Lord, attend to my cry. Give ear to my prayer, for my lips free of deceit. Verse 3, it says, from your presence. So if you want to circle, if you're a Bible circler, if you want to circle presence, you can write face there, because it's the same word that we're going to see later in the text as face in Hebrew. From your presence, from your face, let my vindication, let my judgment come. Let your eyes, you can circle eyes because that's significant to this text. Let your eyes behold the right. So he here is coming out of the gate in the courtroom, and he's doing his opening argument. He's his own lawyer, his own attorney, his own defender. He's just laying it. So the opening argument basically legally is a chance to frame the issue. It's without misstating, so there's no deceit. It's only facts. They would even say, may it please the court. So it's his plea. There's also a legal term that says prayer of relief. So if an attorney were to approach a judge, he could say, I'm requesting a prayer of relief to reverse the court order of blah, 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 because this information proves that it's not true. So there is this prayer that David is coming to God with, but it is also, you'll see how it unfolds here, of how he is, it's so much more than that. So he's defending, he's done his opening argument. But I love this reality about David, and I hope the same could be said of me. Yet he didn't need to say a word, because his actions, his lifestyle, who he was as a human being spoke for itself. And the reality about, and this is where I'm coming in my journey with God, wholehearted living does not require you to say a word. Your life testifies to the truth of who you are. And that is a hard one to process. And even just examining, like right now. So if without me saying a word to defend my cause in any type of court, like if you were standing before a jury and a judge, would your life be able to speak for itself without you even saying a word? This is true of David. So he moves forward here to a point of approving his innocence. There's a process of investigation that takes place. And for those of you who don't know, so Josh and I, before we came here, we were actually working at a small Christian college in Christiansburg, Virginia. Josh was the dean of students, which means basically he was the pastoral care oversight, and he handled all disciplinary issues on the campus. And so this is absurd, but it's just crazy. We still laugh about it today. Cassie you probably know where I'm going with this. So there was all kinds of weird things that would come our way of what we're dealing with. But we had this issue for months at one point of girls' underwear going missing. It was the craziest, most absurd. It's even weird just to even say those words. But we had an underwear thief within our rankings at the Christian college, and it was so weird. And so the reality is, when there's any form of investigation or any type of interrogation, there's automatically these defense mechanisms that go up. We literally ended up at one point, because it happened. Well, we were trying to make sure, one, that all of our females were safe, because that there were no security breaches and all of that. They ended up looking in ceiling tiles. We ended up having to go through, okay, well, maybe it is someone on the girls' floor. They don't ever lock their doors. We ended up having to do a search through every single dorm room over this underwear issue. It was the most absurd thing I have ever experienced in my life. So it's just funny, human nature, and the reality of the moment we feel that we have to prove our innocence, or the moment that there's investigation that begins to take place. Here's some natural human defaults. I experience it with my children. Who left out this gallon of milk from when you left for school this morning, and it's sitting out here at 3? Who had cereal and left the milk out? And immediately fingers start pointing all over, nobody will own it. And so what I love though here is about the reality of David. This is not what he is. This is not who he is. Most of us in that moment get guarded. Some of us walk around guarded without even an investigation taking place. There's just walls, armor all around of a form of protection. But we can our human tendency is to get guarded, possibly a little defensive. The people that I respect the most in my life, and just mentoring and leading and pouring into, especially in the next generation, and being on staff with people for years, when there's hard conversations that have to be had, and there is a confrontation even of, okay, we need to address this area, it doesn't even matter to me in the moment if they can get there. Sometimes there's for me, I'm a processor, so it may take me 24 hours or 48 hours, or it may take me time to get there. But the people that I have the most mad respect for are the people that are confronted with sin, or they're confronted with an attitude or underperformance, or you name it. And it's hard. We've all experienced it on some level or of some fashion. But the people that are able to come to the point of you're right, this is true, and I'm sorry, and this is what I'm going to do about it moving forward. Thank you for loving me enough to speak to me about this issue. I have the most crazy respect for people that can get there. You don't have to get there in the moment, but that are eventually able to get there, because that means there's a desire and a hunger for wholehearted living. And then other ways that we respond upon the investigation process. I do have family in law enforcement, so that might be a part of this. My brother's undercover cop and all this other stuff. So I'm fascinated by all this. But other things in investigation, other human responses, is that sometimes we may realize there is something to hide, that there could possibly be a secret, true colors to be revealed that we don't really care for anyone to see, or possibly that it's too raw and it's too vulnerable and we just don't want to go there. At this point is where, in working in ministry, and I could tell you story after story of this is when the deleting of text messages start to happen. This is when the deleting of your search history on your internet starts to happen. This is when photos start going. Like, this is the, oh, shoot. There's red flags of concern. I've got to start hiding. I've got to start covering. I've got to start swiping it under the rug. And it's that running from that is a lot of times our human natural tendency. And it's not so of David. And so that's what I so love about his character, because he goes before God, and he's in this proving point, and he says, in verse 3, he says, "You have tried my heart. You have visited me by night. You have tested me, and you will find nothing. I have purposed that my mouth will not transgress. With regard to the works of man, by the word of your lips, I have avoided the ways of the violent. My steps held fast to your paths. My feet have not slipped." So here he is. He's in the courtroom, and this is his defense. Here's the facts of who I am. He's laying it out there. He's claiming his innocence. Tried my heart means to be probed. Like, I think about a doctor when they're like going in and you have like abdominal pain and they're pressing. It's not fun. There's a probing that he's saying, God, you've probed me. You've proved it. He says, you've tested my heart. You've visited. You've tried my heart. I want to remind you, a few weeks ago, Josh explained heart. Heart in Hebrew is soul. It's your will. It's your intellect. It's your seat of emotions and your seat of courage. So he's saying, God, you've gone through it all, and you proved that there's nothing there that is not right, that is not of upstanding character. My allergies are so out of whack, so forgive me for the crazy clearing my throat here. He goes into, you visited me by night, go in order to inspect, to explore, to search me. You have tested me. You have tried me. You have refined me with the fire that purges away dross. And I don't know if you've ever looked up a YouTube video of it, but when they go to heat up gold to the point to purify it, it's like 1100 degrees, and it's like red, and there's this black stuff that through the fire begins to come to the process, and they're to come in and they take a little filter and they keep taking out all of the dross, and they keep doing it, and they keep doing it until all the impurities are taken out. And so this season of David's life is dross removal. This season of David's life, this 20-year period from you've been anointed king to you don't get to be king yet, is a process of refining. And each of us in this room, we are in a refining process. And that fire is sometimes hot, and that it's sometimes uncomfortable, and it's sometimes invasive. But it is to prepare us, to lead us for the purposes that God has for us. It's out of his love, his amazing love, that he wants to come in and to remove that stuff, which is yucky, which is evil at its core, to remove it so that we are not separated from him. He says, before God, before man, basically, I'm innocent. I'm proving my case. He says in verse 3, I have purposed with my mouth, my purpose that my mouth has not transgressed. When you hear the word transgressed, it's just something that we don't connect to in our culture at all, but transgress means to alienate or to pass by. So he's saying in this season of, the refining that's not fun, I have purposed that with my mouth, I will not transgress. So I am not going to alienate myself from you, God. I'm not going to alienate myself from those around me. I'm not going to just pass you by, God. I don't want you to just pass me by. I have purposed that I will not speak these things. So then he continues, even there, his mouth is connected to his heart. And that's the same for all of us. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, Jesus says in Luke. And so my question for us this morning, first of all, is what are we speaking? What are you saying? What are the words that are coming out of your mouth? Because it's significant as to what's happening in your heart. And for wholehearted living, we have to open it up to, okay, God, all of it. And so he's saying, I purpose to have it. And I love this part in verse 4. He says, I have kept myself from the ways of the violent through what your lips have commanded. I'm going to read it one more time. I have kept, which means I have been like a watchman. I have observed, I have done due diligence in keeping away from the ways of the violent through what your lips have commanded. So he's saying, God, through your law, through your word, through what you have revealed truth here, I've kept myself from violence. So we think violence and we immediately go to like physical harm. But violence here, it means destroyer, it means murder, it means wild beast, it means robber. And so David's saying, I've kept from all those things. The reality is that violence doesn't just come in the form of physical harm. It comes with the fact that life and death are in the tongue. It comes from the fact that even our thoughts can be brewing violence. David said in Psalms 139, he said, you discern my thoughts from afar off. So you don't have to even do a single action without there to be violence possibly represented in your life, or unforgiveness, or hatred, because it could be simply what's up here. Without saying a word, there's no hiding it from him. So what are you saying? You could be speaking life. You could be robbing from people. You could be destroying people with the words that you speak. And you'll see at the end why that's a very significant thing. I love the fact here, they think that David probably penned and wrote this prayer, this cry of desperation out to God, possibly around the time frame when he was in the cave hiding from King Saul. King Saul had tried on several occasions to take his life. Like he's sitting there playing his harp and a spear goes flying at him. And so this has happened more than once. And so Saul is on the hunt. He is trying to find him. He wants to kill him. He is intimidated. He is threatened by this man. And so he's in the cave. Saul comes into the cave, and he had every single opportunity right then and there to end his life. Like, well, I'm the anointed one. That's my role, so I'm going to step into that. But he knew that it was not his role, that God appoints, he does not appoint, and that he had to ride out this refining process. Paul says in Romans 13, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities, resist what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. And that is a tough read in our political environment today. For those of you dyslexia, you saw that earlier in the week, and I was just like, oh, this is hard. But the reality is, whether you agree or you don't agree, God appoints. And there's something that God's doing that we don't see in the process, and trusting that God is the ruler, God is the ultimate authority, and that his will be done in spite of the person, because he appointed that person and put him there. So there's a point here that David, he doesn't retaliate. Our first thing when we experience injustice, because he is experiencing injustice, he is experiencing persecution for the call that God had on his life. He's experiencing it firsthand. And our natural nature of tendency is to retaliate. He doesn't retaliate. He loved him, and he respected him, and he honored him in spite of his craziness. Like Saul literally comes to a point of insanity as you read through 1st to 2nd Samuel. But he honored him, and we are to do the same. So even in what are the words that we're speaking, in this whole realm of political world, what are you speaking? Are you speaking life? Are you speaking death? On social media, that is a platform of which you get to speak life and death. That is a platform of whether you rob, or you destroy, or you're violent. So we need to be careful and guarded in understanding the reality of the weight of our words. David did, which I so appreciate about him. So after he proves his innocence, he now basically calls on God to be his character witness. Now, character witness in normal courtroom standards would be someone standing and speaking words to testify, proving that you're a legit person, that you're integrous, all of those things. But in this situation, with God, the cool thing about him is he doesn't really need to say a word. He just acts on our behalf. And so God, as his character witness, moves in protection, moves in action, and not just words. So if you look at verses 6 and 8, David says, I will call upon you, for you will answer me, O God. Incline your ear to me. Hear my words. Wondrously show your steadfast love, O Savior of those who seek refuge from their adversaries at your right hand. Keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings from the wicked who do me violence, my deadly enemies who surround me. He goes on to explain his enemies. They close their hearts to pity. It means they basically have shut up their hearts to compassion. With their mouths, they speak arrogantly. They have surrounded our steps. They set their eyes to cast us down to the ground. That literally means, when you go and research it in Hebrew, like it's how, when you're in an arena with the bull, Josh did it one day with the like ring of fire, and you're having like a rodeo, and they set you in the ring, and whoever stays in the ring the longest gets like the money, and they let a bull charge out at you. He chickened out at the last minute because I was like, no, you can't do that. So basically, it's like a bull. When a bull comes at you to charge, all of a sudden they lower their head, they set their eyes down at you, and they're waiting to charge. And so that's a visual of what's happening here, and I'm sure each of you have experienced that possibly on some level. He says it's like a lion eager to tear, as a young lion lurking in ambush. So it's waiting to watch you trip up. It's waiting to see you in your weakest moment. It's outright evil is what's happening here. Then he says, arise, O Lord, and this is where the courage and the boldness and his wholeheartedness, arise, O Lord, confront him, subdue him, deliver my soul from the wicked by your sword, by the men of your hand, O Lord, for the world whose portion is their life, and it just goes on there. But the part that I'm absolutely fascinated by in his protection and his action is this term is the apple of your eye. He says, keep me as the apple of your eye. Now, I will be the first to tell you that I am not poetic. I'm not romantic. Josh can write a card and it's the most beautiful thing and so crafted and insanely beautiful. And my cards are I love you. And so I'm a very factual, realistic, and he's got that total gift that I don't. So I've struggled with this term because I've heard my whole life we're the apple of his eye, but really, what does that mean? How does that, it takes more time for me to process it down to my soul than just spitting it out there. So first of all, here's some random facts that are significant to the reality of us being the apple of his eye. You have to know some truths about the eye. The eye is the most precious protected organ of the body. The eye is the second most complex body organ after the brain. Your eyes, this was crazy to me, use about 60% of your brain power, which is more than any other body part. Fingerprints have about 40 unique characteristics to them, but the iris has 256 unique characteristics to it, which they are now beginning to use to scan. Basically, to go in and scan the retina as a form of security because of how intricately designed the eye is. So that's significant of understanding that keep me as the apple of your eye. So I still struggle because I'm okay, that's the fact, but where's the heart? What are you really trying to say by this? And this is introduced and said in numerous places throughout the Old Testament, but basically it refers to the pupil of your eye. So your pupil, that black spot right there in the center, that is what the apple of your eye is specifically referring to. Probably because 3,000 years ago, they didn't have a lot of objects that looked like that shape. So hello, apple, that was what they termed it as, and it stuck. So they would use that. The Hebrews actually use the phrase apple when they would translate it as little man or little daughter. So when you stand really, really close. And Hannah and I were doing this in our kitchen last night. We were standing like this. It took us about this close. When you stand eye to eye and you're looking someone in their pupil clearly, you see your reflection. It's kind of fascinating. I never had really done that before until we were awkwardly doing it in our kitchen last night. But the reality is there's a closeness that requires. There's an intimacy that requires. That is not something I would care to do with a stranger. It is up in your business. And he's saying, keep me, God, as the apple of your eye. These facts are fascinating. The eye-to-eye and face-to-face contact with mothers as an infant is second only to touch when it comes to the bonding process. Eye-to-eye contact as an infant. At infancy, optimal distance for the eye-to-eye contact with an infant is 10 inches, which just so happens to be the same distance between a mom and a nursing baby. Sorry, men, thought you were going to be at the men's retreat. We're going to go over the nursing conversation. But I find it completely fascinating that God designed us with such intentionality and the reality of how important eye contact is, that as a mother's nursing her child, that they, in those early stages, that's just the exact distance they need to be able to see eye to eye. That simple interaction alone encourages brain development in a child. It releases hormones, reinforces a sense of emotional well-being. Like, it's very significant to touch and eye-to-eye contact with a newborn. So when we think of this phrase, that you're the apple of my eye, it is not birth from man. We didn't come up with this term. This is from the heart of God. He said it. He was saying it over the nation of Israel. Of, I'm going to keep you as the apple of my eye. It's a love that we don't understand. It's a love that we don't get, we don't fully grasp as humans, but it's a love that heals our deepest hurts. The fractured hearts that we have from the world around us, from the sin of man, for the reality of we live in a fallen world. We have fractured hearts. He intends for those hearts to be whole. It's his love. It's his healing. By the stripes of Jesus, we are made whole. It's not just physical. It's emotional. It's spiritual. It's our whole being. It's our deepest hurts and longings that he is able to heal in that eye-to-eye contact, in that one-on-one interaction. So why do we avoid eye contact? We do it with one another, but I think we would be shocked if we fully understood the degree in which we avoid eye contact with our Heavenly Father. Why do we look away? Why do we refuse to take the time to sit in the chair? So Josh has been doing that illustration a few weeks ago, just sitting in the chair and looking God in the face and choosing to be in his presence. Why do we avoid that? Like, why in our schedules, in our priorities, in the flow of life, to seek God's presence? David's in this place. He's defining, this cry, this prayer is bold, is audacious, and he's saying it because he's been in the presence of the one true God. He's seen him, he's looked him eye to eye, and he knows he's got his back. And so, why don't we do it? Why don't we take the time? That's why in this season for me, I say no more than I say yes. The reality of my time with being with God and the time of investing and being fully present with my family, there's whole pieces to this of like, okay, God, you're calling me on this wholehearted journey, and there's vulnerability, which is not fun. I don't like being vulnerable. There's just all these different pieces, but there's incredible healing of the fractured heart that God wants to do in the process. With God's love comes his protection. The other fascinating piece to this whole eye conversation is that it's like one of the most protected organs in our bodies. So the fact that the socket of our eye, the ball of it, is covered by bone structure, by the fact that we have an eyebrow, eyelashes, form tears, the blinking in itself is a defense mechanism of protecting our eye. So he's saying, I've got you because you are fragile. You are in need of covering. And so David's, keep me as the apple of your eye. That's his protection. But the reality that stands out to me is just the cherishing. His incredible keeping us as the apple of his eye is his cherishing of us. It's an adoration. It's the turning our faces, like Josh did last week, like our kids turn our face to look at it. There's an adoration. His cherish, his love, he wants to protect us. He wants to care for you. He wants to have you fully engaged. And so the whole cherishing conversation is, so what is our response in that? I love in Proverbs, so Solomon was born. David was not a perfect man, okay? David had his issues. He had an affair. He committed a murder to try to cover up the affair. He then failed as a father in different realms. So David was not, we're not saying here like you're going to be sinless and perfect. David was not perfect, but he was claimed to be a man after the heart of God. And so it's penned by Solomon, who was born from David and Bathsheba's affair, and he's giving words to his son, and this is what he says. He says, "My son, keep my words and treasure my commands within you. Keep my commands and live, and let my law as the apple, keep my law as the apple of your eyes." So not only are we saying, God, keep us, but God's saying to us, you keep my law, which is this right here, as the apple of your eye. He says, bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. You could quote scripture at me all day long. My question for you is, does your life reflect what you're quoting? Does our life show that there's compassion? Does our life show that there's long suffering? Does our life show wholeheartedness? Does it show that we're all in? Does it show when we make a commitment that we show up on time? Does it mean when we're invested as a wife or husband that we are fully all in, devoted as a wife and husband, as a mother, as a father? Does our life reflect this? Or is this just head knowledge? Because he's saying, write these on the tablet of your heart, not just on your mind, which is another reason why we're going through this process of we're studying the word and we're reading it and we're saying, God, test me, prove me, try me, examine me, because I'm not content with just this being in my head. I want it in my heart. Cherishing the word means it's invasive, means it's close. It's studying it, it's being in it, it's memorizing, it's meditating on the word of God. And the reality is, David in other scriptures, he says, your word is a light unto my path. Your eyes without light, they adjust somewhat, but without light, your eyes struggle, right? Does anybody hit something in the middle of the night and try to go to the bathroom? Your eyes struggle without light. This right here is the light unto our path. And I have known Christians who have professed to know Christ, and they've gone to their grave, but without the knowing, without the light of Christ, without him shining the light on their path, without the fruit. Jesus said to the Pharisees, he said, you confess to know me, and you could quote the whole Old Testament to me, but I know you not. And so the reality of that reflection of our hearts. So then he moves really quickly into the whole plaintiff-defendant conversation. Here's some of my legal geekiness coming out. Your plaintiff is basically the one that's bringing the complaint. That is King Saul to David. And David is the defendant. He's having to defend himself, but he's choosing to run to God. The cool thing here is you've got King Saul versus King David. So you always you go after the plaintiff, then the defendant. Through this text, this is what we see. A calloused heart versus a softened heart. Pride versus humility. We see deceit versus truth. Fear versus courage. Secrecy versus vulnerability. Powers and principalities versus the kingdom of heaven. And the demonic versus the power and authority of Jesus Christ laid out before us. But his closing argument is my favorite. In verse 15, this is how he wraps it up. As for me, it's a very short and sweet closing argument. As for me, I will see your face. which means I will be in your presence. I will be there in right standing. I will be satisfied when I awake. Here on earth, I will live heaven on earth right here, right now, and also when I actually get there and be at your right hand in heaven, I'm going to live it out. I will be satisfied. You are more than enough for me. There's nothing else that this world can offer. I'm satisfied. He says, when I awake, he was awake. Wholehearted living requires being awake. I say that because I think some of us haphazardly go through life not fully living, not fully awake. It means to wake up to the realities of the God who sees you as the apple of his eye. He adores you. He cherishes you. He loves and he protects you. To wake up and allow him to see you eye to eye, allow him to examine you, to try you, allowing for vulnerability with God and with others. It means to wake up. This is the most significant point. Wake up to see that others are also the apple of his eye. We live through life, and it's really fun to hear this text in Zechariah 2, verse 8. It says, the one who touches you touches the apple of my eye. Now, that's really fun for us to read for us personally. So the one who threatens you, the one who speaks against you, the one who is basically what they're doing is they're taking their fingers and they're sticking their fingers in the eyes of God. They're assaulting God because you are his precious, cherished son and daughter. And so when they assault you, they're assaulting the living God. That's awesome for us. The flip side of that is that every person is also made in God's image. They are also the apple of his eye. He has a desire for them. So how we speak to them, how we care for them, how we show compassion or don't show compassion, acknowledge or don't acknowledge, we are doing so as though we're doing to God. It says, the one who touches you touches the apple of my eye. So how are we touching those around us? How are we speaking to those around us? It's significant. And the seeking and the full-hearted pursuit of God, our lives and that examining and that refining process, those are the things that God's going after. He's going after all of us. He wants every single part of us. He wants our words. He wants our actions. He wants us to honor him in our finances. He wants us to be with him because that purification removes all of the junk that separates us from him. So our judgment, our sentence. David was like, for me, this is where I'm at. I know that I'm a sinner. He repented even in the whole thing with him and Bathsheba. He repented. There was still the fallout of sin that happened. But for you and I today, we stand here in a court scene and we're guilty. We stand here and it says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So each of us, with the human nature that we are born into, have sin. Even Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Jesus Christ our Lord. It's his loving kindness. It's his hesed mercy. It's his favor. It's the work that Jesus did on the cross for us that we get to stand here in the trial seat today, and we get to stand justified in right standing and get to boldly approach the throne room of God when we stand and we look him eye to eye. My question for us this morning is this. Gaze into his eyes. You are the apple of his eye. It takes this. Gaze into his eyes. You see your image. You see yourself back. What do you see? So I want you to grab your connection card. Remember what I said upon the point of investigation? Human nature, our tendency at this very moment, even right now, would be to turn our head the other way. Human nature would be secrecy versus authentic vulnerability, honest living. But the wholehearted pursuit that we're on just can't settle for that. If you are here and you are actively attending Family Fellowship Church, we are on a journey and we are on a road that is fast and furious after the heart of God. It is a road that is wanting to seek Him with all that we are and intently gaze eye to the point that it requires us to see our reflection, which is not always fun. But we're not going to be complacent. He is calling us outside of where you currently are. He has taken you by the hand, and He has taken you into deeper waters. And it can be uncomfortable. And the refining process is interesting, but it is out of His incredible love. It's out of His incredible mercy. It's out of He wants sons and daughters that are wholeheartedly His. There's incredible freedom in that reality. This isn't religion. If we are taking this word and we're opening it up and we're reading it and our lives are not obeying, that is religion. But David's saying, try me, examine me, test me, search me, is no joke. I told you I would share a snippet from my own journey. And then we'll close this up. Proverbs 20:30 was what I was actually writing about. Blows that wound, so it means bruising, cleanse away all evil. Strokes or stripes, little stripes that Jesus had on His body for us. Stripes make clean the innermost parts. It said, I am not a victim. I am a sinner. It is not a matter of deserving this wound. It's a matter of you love me too much to let me live life with something of evil in me which separates me from you. This is the awakening. Your lamp, your light, shining into my depths, revealing truth. This is the searching. This is the examining of my heart. When we ignore you, we fight this. It often requires drastic measures to get our attention. It's a loving father which disciplines his child. This is the eye-to-eye contact. This is the wanting to be in your presence. This is solitude. I want to know. I want you to shine your light in. It's scary to look at it. We'd always want to see the truth of who we are, but that is not wholeheartedness. It's your marvelous hesed kindness, which has led me to where I am today, oh God. Had I hardened my heart and not come to this place of understanding my own sin, my own evil, this isn't rejection. This isn't any story I'm making up. This is you waking me up from the numb, mindless summer who wasn't fully living, who wasn't fully awake. He's calling us to wake up. He's saying, wake up and be satisfied in my presence. I am more than enough. I will protect you. I will guard you. I will go before you. I will be your rear guard. I am everything that you need. It's his loving kindness. So we're going to take a few moments. And it can be awkward. But I want you to write down, what do you see?